Hello everyone, this is Sam from Language Atlas, and in this video I'm going to show you the Spanish A1 Anki deck. Now we'll do three things. First is that I'll show you the course structure of Spanish A1. Second, I'll show you the course content, where I'll focus on three decks. And third, I will show you some brief editing options. But before we get started, I'd just like to highlight one thing. There is a European Spanish version and a Latin American Spanish version. And European Spanish is just the one that is spoken in Europe, i.e. Spain. And naturally, I recommend that you only focus on one of the two. In this video, I will show you both, just so you have a good overview of both. And when you get it, you can actually choose which one you want, whether it's the European Spanish or the Latin American Spanish. So please keep that in mind. You will see both, but naturally, I recommend that you only choose one. So let's get started. Now, normally you just double click on whichever one you want. However, I've already done that. So you can see I have over here the European Spanish one and over here the Latin American Spanish one. So I'll begin with point number one, is that I'll show you the course structure. So I'll just begin with the European Spanish one. If you open it, you see you have card types. You see you have A0, A1, and then you have A1. Now I'd like to ignore the card types one, and I'd like to just get started with Spanish A0, A1. So I'll just open this, and you can see that there are 5 chapters. In the first chapter, we have pronouns. And when I open that, you can see it's the basic subject pronouns, how to say I, you, he, she, etc. And please notice you have over here vosotros. And then I go to chapter 2. We have just the basic verbs, estar, ser, and tener, like the essential verbs in Spanish. Then in chapter 3, we have idioms. How to say there is, there are, I am from, and where you live, etc. We go to chapter number 4, where we see articles and nouns, and essentially how do you say the and a and plural the in Spanish. And we go to chapter number 5, where we see questions and interrogatives, and here you will learn how to ask what is it. Now this is the Spanish A0, A1 deck. This is really the basic of basics. Then I'd like to go to the Spanish A1. Now this is where the real Spanish A1 gets started, so to say. And then we have 7 chapters. So I'd like to get started with chapter number 1, which is the verbs. You can see over here, it's already a lot more. We have regular verbs. Think of the AR, ER, and IR verbs. We have the semi-regular stem changing verbs. Essentially, these are all verbs that change their stem. Then we have the common irregular verbs. Think of poder, poner, etc. Saber, of course, to know. Then we go to chapter 1.4. We have irregular verb groups, certain verb groups which are just irregular. They don't really fit in with the others, and you can see them over here. Then I'll go to chapter 1.5. We have reflexive verbs, and here how to do reflexive verbs, how to conjugate them, and here the most important one, this one you'll use to introduce yourself. Then we have verbs and time, and essentially you'll learn a bit about when to use the present tense, when to use the near future, a bit about gerunds. Essentially we'll focus more on the time aspect of it. And that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, we have idioms, and again you see some more idioms. How can you express pain? Can you express that you like doing something? Or how can you say time or times? And some important ones, when to use estar and when to use ser. We'll go to chapter number 3, articles and nouns. And we have over here nouns is essentially a complete guide to Spanish nouns and how to know the gender of Spanish regular nouns and how to use them. Then we have contractions. Essentially in Spanish you have contractions. And then we have Spanish 3.3 indefinite articles, essentially how to say some and a few. We have definite articles and the fact that you use definite articles with clothing and the body. We'll go to chapter 4, adjectives and adverbs, and you can see there are regular adjectives. How do you use them? You have quantitative adjectives. How do you use those? Demonstrative adjectives, that, those, this, these. We have adverbs, how to form regular adverbs that end in mente. Possessive adjectives, how do you use those? And finally some other ones, how to use color and how to say very, a lot, much, many, and more, less, and fewer. Chapter 5, questions and interrogatives. Essentially, how do you ask what questions in Spanish? Very important. Then I'd like to go to chapter 6. We have negations, and here I'll show you how to negate things in Spanish. And finally, we have chapter 7, where you learn about prepositions and conjunctions. Very important, how you can say that you're going to something, how to say that you're with or something or someone, towards, around, essentially some very important things that you need to know. Now this is the European Spanish version. I'd like to show you the Latin American Spanish version now. When we click on the plus sign, you can see essentially it's the same setup. We have the card types, we have the A0, A1, and the A1. Over here, a difference is that there's no vosotros. In Latin America, they don't use vosotros, so that one you don't have. And when we go to Spanish A1, essentially is the same setup. You don't have any big differences. The biggest difference is the vosotros. So now you may ask, okay, what's the difference between these two decks? Well, first of all, it's what inside the deck that counts when we go to the course content. In terms of structure, they're very, very similar. So I like to get focused on point number 2, which is the actual course content, i.e. we'll look at some decks. So I'll get started with that. I'd like to show you 2 decks from the European Spanish one and 1 deck from the Latin American Spanish one, so you can kind of get a good feel of what things are like. So I'll get started with that. I'd now like to show you some practical examples. So we'll go to a deck. I'll open the European Spanish one. I'll go to A1. Then we have verbs over here, and then I'd like to go to regular AR verbs. So click on that. Study now. And you can see there's a Spanish sentence, the infinitive in Spanish, sometimes called the full verb, an English translation, and then a picture, so you can have an association with the sentence. And now it's your job to know what goes inside this blank area over here. So the first card type is know what goes in this area. So you have to conjugate cantar. Do you know the answer?
Él siempre canta en la ducha.
And you can see that you have to end it with an A. And you can see the English translation. You can click on this or the R button to hear the Spanish sentence again.
Él siempre canta en la ducha.
If we go down, we can see an explanation area. We can see, okay, how do I actually conjugate this? If you go even down further, you can see the conjugation method. So you see an AR verb, you have to cut off that AR and end it with the correct ending. In our case, it was an A, as you can see over here. You can see some common regular AR verbs, so you can get a good reference. Over here, you have a link if you want to see the actual article on the website. Now that was the first card type. I'd like to show you the second card type now. You can click on good or space.
Y otra, tú, nosotros, vosotros, las malas.
And the second card type is essentially a typing exercise where you can see the same blank, but you have to know, okay, what goes inside this blank? What do I have to fill in there? So I type it in.
Él siempre canta en la ducha.
And it's the correct answer. And we know it's correct because it's green, and if you want, there's another green version over here for your reference. And it was good. But what if I don't know the correct answer? What if I just type in something like this?
Yo trabajo en esta empresa.
And you can see that it's being corrected. A L is wrong, it's supposed to be an O. So even if you make a mistake, you'll be corrected. And again, it's the same explanation in audio over here. Now that was the second card type. Now I'd like to show you the third one.
Tú, no, vos, las malas.
And the third card type is that you see a sentence in Spanish, but it's your job to know the English translation.
Él siempre canta en la ducha.
And over here, it's the English translation. Now the fourth card type.
Y otra, tú, nos, vosotros, las malas.
You can see that there's a sentence in English, and it's your job to know the correct translation in Spanish.
Él siempre canta en la ducha.
Now that is the first deck that I wanted to show you, and you could see all the 4 card types. I'd like to show you another example. I will minimize this. I'll go to idioms, and a big issue I think for a lot of people is, okay, when do I use estar or when do I use ser? So you can go over here to when to use ser. Study now. You can see over here we have a blank area, and you have to know, all right, what goes here.
Tú eres profesor.
And it's eres, and essentially you can see an explanation area here as well. Okay, when do I use ser? You can see all the times that you have to use it, and the conclusion is essentially these are things that are more or less permanent. And let's go to another example. You can see Madrid, and then you have a blank over here, and again what goes there.
Madrid es la capital de España.
Ser. Now when you see it like this, it's perhaps a little bit easy because you know that's going to be ser anyway. But if you go over here, if you're going to chapter 2 idioms, and you click on study now, then you'll be faced with examples in general, and at a certain point you will see some examples where either it's probably ser or estar, and you don't know, and that's when the real knowledge comes into play. So you can use this as a, let's say, practice deck, and then when you get to over here, you really have to know your stuff. And I like to go to the third deck, and I like to go to the Latin American deck, so you can see what that's like. So I'll maximize this, and I will go to A1 again. I will go to adjectives and adverbs, and over here, regular adjectives. I'll click on it, study now. And you can see it's the same format. However, when I click on this,
Estos libros son famosos.
you might have heard that the pronunciation is a bit different. I'll click on it again.
Estos libros son famosos.
And this is because the way that Spanish is spoken in Latin America is not the same as the Spanish that is spoken in Spain, hence the difference in pronunciation. And as you probably know, pronunciation is incredibly important, and hearing how it is spoken is something that will aid you a lot. However, overall the setup is the same, where you have the examples over here. Okay, how do I actually do this? How does it differ from masculine and feminine examples? And of course you can see famosos, plural, os. Another example, same setup, there's a blank area, show answer.
Mis hermanos son amistosos.
And again, os, masculine, plural. And again, pronunciation.
Mis hermanos son amistosos.
And one more. You can see a feminine example, feminine plural. Hopefully you know the answer.
Las chicas son graciosas.
And you can see that it ends with as. Now, I'd like to go back. And you can see that overall the European Spanish and Latin American Spanish one, in terms of course structure, they're almost identical. Except in European Spanish you use vosotros, and in Latin American you do not. So you have to use one fewer way of conjugating. So good for you if you're doing Latin American Spanish. The biggest difference is that one, and also the sentences inside essentially are a little bit different. Pronunciation is also different. So keep that in mind. And I'd like to go to point 3 now. I'd like to show you some brief editing options. One of the things that you noticed is that there were 4 ways in which you were tested. So if I go to the card types deck, you can see that there were 4 ways that you were tested. You had to know what's in the blank area. That was the first one. The second was you had to type in a blank area. And then the third and fourth were translations. Either you see something in Spanish, you have to know it in English, or vice versa. Now 4 ways can be a lot for most people. That's why there's also the beginner friendly option, where it's just you have to know what's in the blank area, or you have to type in a blank area. This is a lot better for most people. There's no translation, and personally I also prefer this. When you get the deck, by default it will be in this way. However, I know there's some people that like to have translation options, some people that don't. And for those people, I like to quickly just show you how you can switch from one of them, one version to the other. So do you remember the card types deck? We'll get rid of it. Or in other words, we'll just move it to the top. We go to European Spanish one. Control A or Command A. We'll go to not manage node types, but to change node type. We have over here the beginner one, which is what we want. So select the beginner friendly one. Click on OK. Wait a second. And you can see that there are just 2 options for every sentence, which means you have to do no translating at all. Again, Control A or Command A, change node type, we go to the language atlas card, we click on OK, and again you can see there's 4. So just control your Command A, and then you can go to the change node type and you can just select whichever one you want, the language atlas card or the beginner friendly one. By default it will be in the beginner friendly one, which is what I also recommend, but for those of you that like to translate, please remember you always have just the normal ones. Finally, I'd like to show you one more thing, is that you can actually change the amount of cards that you do. If you click on this little icon over here and go to options, you can see the amount of new cards per day that can switch. So you can go to 60, that means every day you'll have 60 new cards. You can go to reviews, which means that essentially you review things that you've already done. You can increase this or decrease this to whatever you want, and this will change. You can see this is now 60. Personally, I recommend is that in the beginning you choose a low number. So if you go to options, you can make this, for example, 20, and I think reviews 20 or 30 suffices, because what you want to do is you want to build up a habit, and this way you can get started and do more and more over time. Now I think that's that for this lesson. The most important things I've covered. Please just choose whichever version you want, whichever you prefer. If you want to learn Spanish that's spoken in Spain, go with the European Spanish one. If you want to know that the one that is spoken in Latin America, you can go with that one. You can choose which one you want over here. Please don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions. You can go to languageatlas.com for all the information. I will put all the links in the comment area and in the description as well. Thank you for watching this video. I wish you an excellent day. Goodbye.